Welcome back to Bigger Than Basketball Podcast, episode 2, hosted, sponsored by ADG Barbershop. Shout out to Sean White, everyone here that works here. Today we have a very special guest for myself and many others who played at Curtis High School. The legendary coach, Tim Gannon, who in 11 seasons at Curtis has 6 titles, 2 back-to-back titles, undefeated seasons, 3 Jakes Award winners, Sandy Brock, Timmy Holland, and Nigel Wyatt, and a ton of advanced All-Stars and Daily News All-Stars, and a Zabrowski Award winner on Staten Island, which is considered the hardest working player, which was A.J. Oliver. So I would like to introduce the best high school coach, basketball, football, baseball of all time, the legendary Tim Gannon. Coach,
Red, good to be here. Even though none of that was true, it's still good to be here.
thank you for coming to sit down and talk with Coach Red. I like to thank Miss Gannon because Miss Gannon is the reason why Coach is here taking this interview. So thank you, Miss Gannon. Just have a few questions I'd like to ask you just about Curtis basketball and your time at Curtis. The first question is, what was the most important aspect of building a great basketball program while you was at Curtis?
The most important part, um, I, I think and when I say we, it really started when Coach Carroll, who was my predecessor, brought me in. When he became varsity coach, I became the JV coach. And I think we were a good team. We were very different in our approaches and in 9 million ways, but I think we complemented each other. And I think what we really brought to the program was a sense of strong discipline and values that ultimately, as we built the program, set us apart from others. And it was, to coin my phrase, it was always the little things. From the beginning, we showed up in shirts and ties and shoes and pants for games because games were serious and we wanted our players to be thinking seriously before the game. It was about, if you weren't at practice at the practice time, you were not going to step foot in the gym, and you were going to be held accountable at the next game. And I think from those types of discipline things, we built upon success. And contrary to what people think, high school kids want discipline. They want to know what is expected, and then they want to follow through. And I really think between myself at the JV and then varsity, and with Coach Carroll on the varsity, we really had a strong sense of discipline that ultimately helped to build the program.
You think kids like discipline?
I know they like it. Because discipline is easy for kids to understand. They know the limits, and there's no guesswork. There was no guesswork at Curtis. That if you weren't on time for practice, you were going home, and you were not going to be happy in the next game, no matter what your role was. So there's no, I wonder if you knew the outcomes to your actions. And we tried to be consistent with that because it keeps the focus on basketball. You're not worried about your girlfriend. You're not worried about other distractions. You have to be at practice at a certain time. You get to practice, you work hard. And if you don't work hard, someone, because of the amount of talent we had at Curtis, is going to take your spot and you're going to lose out. So there was a lot of motivation to always do the right thing, stay on task, stay disciplined, and good results will follow.
So kids do like discipline. I thought kids didn't like discipline because I try to, when I was coaching, I'm not coaching anymore, I try to follow the same discipline that you taught me at Curtis. And when I speak to Mike J, when I speak to Jeremy, when I speak to Dwayne or other people that coach high school basketball, it's the same, it's the same thing. So kids like discipline. That's good to know.
Yeah, I think when you look at my former players who are coaching now, one of the things I enjoy is watching the discipline of their players. And players don't like when discipline is not carried out consistently. So if I'm late for practice and there's no ramifications, and you're late for practice and there are consequences, you're going to be upset because I got away with it, you didn't. But I think if there's consistency, everyone knows the deal, everyone's going to encourage their teammates to do the right thing because the ramifications impact everybody. That's why it's a team sport.
Next question. Coach, you always said that little things led to championships. Do you recall a particular moment when a player or two did the little things to help lead us to a championship? Not my years or any years that you coach. You do have 6 of them, so.
Well, I think little things are oftentimes tough to identify because they're little. But it's the volume of little things. I used to say it's like a blizzard. When you look at snow coming down, it's nothing. It's a little drop of water frozen. But then when you put them all together, you get hit with a blizzard and New York City comes to a stop. Little things in basketball are like that. Little things outside of basketball, which we often talked about, doing your homework, holding the door for someone, saying thank you. It all builds up. So when you get to championships, yes, you will have a season full of little things. So it's a little tough, but like one example, I had a player, Joey Neer, and Joe was a great defensive player, and he would play a significant role in the semifinals. We were playing a Staten Island team in the semifinals on Staten Island, and they had a really good scorer, somewhere around 24 points a game. And Joe's job for that game was to stop this kid from scoring. And I remember talking to him before the game. I said, well, if you hold him to 12 and he normally gets 24, that's like you scoring 12. So I don't need you to score. I need you to stop him. And he did. But the little thing was in the championship game, he barely played because he didn't have that role. And someone else got his playing time because of a different role. Those players like that define the little things because they needed to do something to help the team win that nobody else would know, including probably his teammates won't remember that. But that championship came about because he was willing to play a significant role in the semis and a lesser role in the championship and still celebrate the championship. Like those types of little things define champions. I mean, the famous one that I probably talked to you about when you were playing was, again, A.J. Oliver, the Zabrowski winner.
The dive
In the
championship.
dive in the fame, and I think that was my first year, my first championship game, and with about 3 minutes to go in a tight game with St. Peter's, the ball was going out of bounds, and he just went completely horizontal from I don't even know where, and just tapped the ball back to us. A little insignificant moment, but it energized us like I don't think any team I've had since then to go on to win the championship, by a decent number of points. So you look at those moments, those are the types of little things I think that win championships.
Joey, I played with Joe Neer. He was a senior when I was a junior. So he was on the team with Angel and Jeff, Tom Pennant. So I want to say was that the Tyville game? He played that good defensive role, and we wound up facing Noodle, I believe, in the championship. So shout out to Joe Nair, he's actually he's a football coach, I believe, at St. Peter's now. Did you know that, coach?
Yeah, I don't know if he's still coaching. I think he was coaching. He was coaching at Farrell for a bit. I didn't know about St. Peter's, but he should be coaching. He'd be a great coach.
All right, the next question I have. Can you tell us a story or two that you always remember from coaching at Curtis?
I mean, there are so many. There are so many stories. I was blessed with so many great things. My first year, my first game when we lost to St. Peter's opening night by 3, and Peter Timmons hadn't been eligible because of football. His football season ended, and he didn't have enough practices to play that night. And I still remember, we had played a good game. We were a little bit young. I was a new coach. We were kind of feeling everything out. And after the game, in-barreled Peter Timmons, angry that we had lost. And, he grabbed me in the hallway and he said, "We will not lose another game on Staten Island." And I remember blowing it off like, all right, just, calm down. It's only one game. We learned a lot. This will help us. But lo and behold, it wasn't until after the season when we had won the Staten Island Championship that indeed he was correct. That was going to be the last one that we lost on the island. And so that's just like a fun memory of sometimes the kids have to kind of remind us adults of what's possible. But there's the story of me taking Devin Sayers out for breakfast before the championship, before the Staten Island playoffs, his senior year, and we were having breakfast, and I always like to try to take point guards out and talk to them a little bit at points of the season. And I was talking about how tough it was going to be because we weren't playing well going into the tournament. We had just gotten blown out. And he looked at me, he said, "Coach, are you worried about the Staten Island playoffs?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm worried. I'm very worried." And he just said, "Coach, you don't even have to worry about that. We got this. This thing is over." And lo and behold, we went through quite easily and unexpectedly through the playoffs. So, those stories are the fun stories. There's lots of stories that weren't fun and lots of stories that didn't end up successful. But those are the memories that I cherish. Those little one-on-ones with players that allowed us to grow as a program.
What's your feeling like? How you touched on opening night when you lost? What's your thoughts and what's your, I guess, perspective on opening night, the famous rivalry, St. Peter's High School versus Curtis High School?
Well, I think it's special. I often used to say, I wish every high school coach on Staten Island could experience that night. It's special on so many levels. People would say, what's it like in the gym? And I say it's intense rivalry, but it's never disrespectful. It's never, you don't get cursing, you don't get inappropriate cheers, you never get a fight. In all my years at Curtis, there was never a fight at that game, after the game, because there was genuine respect and affection for the tradition and the programs, and it was a celebration of of a great sports tradition on Staten Island. And I think we always tried to respect that. I think once the ball went up, it was a war. I mean, it was fun, it was intense, but it was war. And after the game, we could shake hands, we could be friendly towards one another, and I just think that it's a night that no other part of the city can parallel um, at the high school level to begin their season. So it's special, and I hope it's still continues 100 years from now.
Yeah, opening night is definitely special. I'm gonna attend this year. This is the first time I've been to opening night in a long time. So I got former players or that I coach in the summertime on Peters, Talib, Clancy, MJ, and then at Curtis, you got Alonzo, you got Jay Dixon, so it should be good. I actually like the kid. His name is Makai. I think he believes he's a sophomore. He reminds me a lot of Solo. For some reason, I don't know. I see Makai and I just see Solo. So I'm really expecting big things from Makai this year. Makai, don't prove Coach Red wrong, Makai. Coach, the next question that I have for you is a lot of my peers, a lot of my players, a lot of my friends, they always say, of course, Gannon won. Anybody could have won with that team. He had superstars. So my question to you is, with all that star-studded players, that came through Curtis, how did you manage and how your coaching staff manage to keep all of the egos intact and have them focused on one goal, and that was to win the championship in February?
Well, I think a lot of people who don't really know the game and don't know high school basketball, nonetheless have strong opinions on lots of things. And I'll give you an example. We were kind of known for our red press and pressure and transition. And I think because guys like you made it look easy, they fail to understand what goes into making it look easy. So I don't think, were we blessed with talent? 100%. Did we go into every game with more talent than the other team? I don't believe that. But I do believe that in the spirit of the fist, that we taught players to put their needs aside, like five fingers, and come together to form a fist, because a fist is stronger than five fingers acting independently. And I think we were very good, both at the JV level with JV coaches and then my assistants, at getting players to understand they could be part of something bigger than their individual needs or egos. And I think that was a culture that guys wanted to be a part of. But I think, you know, players like Sandy was a great player, but if Sandy was sitting here with me, he would say he was a far better player because he had Peter Timmons playing with him. He was a far better player because Timmy Highland was on the outside, or Pedro Baez was on the outside, or Haas Wilkerson shooting jump shots. So it isn't the ability of, or the coming, the ability to draw talent. I think it had to be developed and practiced. And you can talk to how much we practiced fast break basketball every day in order to make it look easy, how much we worked on man-to-man defense every day in order to make it look easy. So I think true basketball people see that and understand that. And to the casual fans who just say, oh, he just has a bunch of guys who dunk, so it's an easy job, I think just is like me talking about brain surgery. I don't really know enough to comment.
All right. The next question I have is you asked me this thing today. You said you love like the Sandy Brock stories because I just missed Sandy and everyone talks so highly of Sandy. Everyone. And my question to you is, what does Sandy Brock have that few people recognize or wouldn't understand or understood, shall I say?
I think what Sandy was a great athlete. He was a great basketball player. He was a slasher, a scorer, a defender. He was exciting. So for the fan, that's what they got to see. They wanted the Sandy dunk. They wanted to see him do something that very few people athletically could do. But I think what many people didn't see was his unselfish passing. He was a great passer. But because you walked out of the gym talking about his 3 dunks and the move he made and the block he made on someone, it's easy to forget what a good passer he was. Um, and I believe what really set him apart was his great versatility. You know, we played Robeson in the quarterfinals of the city, and they had 4 Division One players. 2 went to Georgetown, 1 went to Syracuse, and we're battling with them. And at the end of the first quarter, I made Sandy the point guard because their guards, a kid named Griffin, who went
Alan
to
Griffin.
Syracuse, was too big. So Sandy just looked at me. I go, "You're going to play point guard," and he went with it. And John Thompson, the great coach at Georgetown, was there. He impressed Thompson, and who had never seen him play, playing point guard for the first time. So that type of versatility, where he could play a big man underneath, he could play a point guard, he could do any position on the floor with, greatness, with really strong play, I think is what made him special, along with the unselfish passing that he certainly contributed to that team.
Rest in peace. I'm always going to ask, whenever I get a Curtis basketball player up here, I'm always going to ask a Sandy Brock question because I recall when I moved out here, I lived in a group home, and I never forget Ed Watkins, rest in peace. He called the group home and to let Deborah Kelly know what happened with Sandy, and then when we went to school the next day, the whole school was crying, depressed. It was like a black cloud over Curtis High School, especially that whole day, the whole year, but that day in particular, I never forget it. It was like a black cloud over the school. And Joyce Simonson, who was school safety at the time, she was rough. But even that day, it broke her down. So Sandy touched more people than I think that anybody would even recognize or even know.
Well, I think Sandy represented a movement out of poverty, and he was meeting his goals. He wasn't eligible his junior year, and he fought hard, and he became eligible to play his senior year, and then he went to a junior college for a year, and then he was being heavily recruited by LIU to continue his basketball career and his college career. So he was on his way up. He had been through some tough times. So, when you have that type of tragedy where he's just sitting in a car and a victim of a bullet that is not intended for him, then it brings out the emotions of an entire community. And it wasn't just Curtis, it was certainly Curtis, but it was the entire New Brighton community of, yet another tragic loss of someone who we saw as, making the right steps to lead to a good life.
Actually, Omar, I saw Omar here, and he said the other day we was here in the barbershop, and he said that Sandy was not eligible his junior year, and after his junior year, he said that you gave him a paper saying you got to pass these classes, and then go to summer school, and then you can play your senior year, and that's what he did.
Yeah, I think Sandy was, people would say, oh, he was rough. He was a tough New Brighton kid. He was the only starter that year that started every game. Everybody else I suspended at one point or another for something. So, I used to say, Sandy, once he made the team and he was set, he knew how to keep going. That's why, you talk about the discipline. If the program is disciplined and you kind of set, here are the guidelines. Here's what you have to do to be successful. Sandy met them. He was never late for practice. He was never an issue with discipline in the classroom. He passed his classes. He did what he had to do. And again, I think that's why people saw where he had been, where he had disciplined himself to get to something that he wanted, and then to lose that was just tragedy.
All right. The next question.
How many questions are there? Is that like 100?
No, it's not. It's not 100 questions.
Because I'm going to get a haircut if we're going to do more.
This is once in a lifetime.
All
Sean
right.
probably could
All right.
shape you up. I just have two more questions, and we're getting into something that Miss Gannon loves. It's called Coach Red, Who Cares? And I was thinking about changing it, but Miss Gannon said she loves Coach Red, Who Cares? So
I usually say, who cares about Coach Red? But that's all right. You can switch
all
the
right.
order.
How does it feel to have so many former players that you see coaching right now? You got Jeremy Smalls at Port Richmond. You got Ray Palmer at Newdorp. You got Mike J. You got Dwayne Archibald at Curtis. You got Timmy Holland, who once coached. How does it feel to see some of your former players coaching?
Well, first off, it's a proud thing for a coach to see your former players. It's not just coaching; it's the way those guys coached. It's like you had Coach Woodman back at Curtis. He was a former player when we first started. Coach McNamara. I mean, these guys are tremendous. When you have former coaches and they're trying to instill the same values that we tried to instill, then that's a proud moment. It's not about wins. People get too focused on wins. It's about, at the end of the day, it's not a Staten Island championship. You're trying to produce good young men, good citizens. And when you see the same lessons being taught, that there's discipline, that, I used to tell the story, if we were winning a game and former players were in the gym, and one of my players didn't take a charge, I had to listen to it after the game from the former players. They'd be like, Coach, what's up with Tripp? He didn't take a charge in the fourth quarter. What, because you're winning? And I always liked the fact that they were bothering me about that, because it meant that they carried those values on, the little things values. So, when people said we needed to let up on wearing shirts and ties, I'm like, no, we're good. We'll wear shirts and ties, and we're going to carry our sneakers in. We're not going to walk into the gym with sneakers on. So when you have coaches now, Ray Palmer, very proud of Ray, and Jeremy Smalls, same thing, who are doing the same types of things for their players. I could care less as an old coach whether they win. I just want to see their guys working hard and doing those little things that we spoke about, because that's what's going to carry the players later on. You know, when you get a Nigel, or when you get together with the guys who you won championships with, or whether it's Timmy Highland's era or the later eras, they don't talk so much about championships. They talk about the times they had together as teammates. And when you're doing that, you know, one of the great shots that I loved, you know, you talk about one of my former players who I love, Damon Hurd, who we lost just over a year ago, was watching him and Ray coach together because they were together on a basketball team. Now they're coaching together. Those are special moments for any coach to experience.
Coach, you gave your former point guard Red Tripp some very good advice while he played with you for 2 years at Curtis.
Don't talk to girls, or was it something else?
What advice? No, on winning you 2 championships. But what advice would you give Coach Red and his brand bigger than basketball moving forward?
I guess just follow the name that you guys have on your sweatshirts. You know, what's bigger than basketball? How you act, how you conduct yourself, how you play the game, how you do in the classroom. All the things that are bigger than basketball should be what the discussion is about. So, you know, what I would say to Coach Red when you're trying to send the right message is make sure the players know that way more important than a championship, way more important than a win is their individual growth and success. And if they think it's about winning a basketball game or winning a championship, then they're probably going to hurt the team more than they're going to help the team. So keep the focus on those little things and keep the focus on reminding them that it's bigger than basketball and that basketball is not the biggest thing in their lives.
All right. Coach Red is going to take that in consideration. This is my favorite part of the show. It's called Coach Red, Who Cares? Where I'm going to list some names to Coach Gannon, and he's going to, I guess, the first thing that come to your mind, or you want to break it down real quick. But it's just a couple names that I have written down here, and I'm just curious to know what you think.
And if I don't want to say anything,
You could just,
who cares?
you don't have to say anything.
I just say, who cares?
You could say who cares, right?
Okay.
Peter Timmons.
Hard to control. And I'm talking for the other team, not for me. He was a force under the basket. He was a force defensively, and he was a force in creating a winning, positive attitude with my first team.
Angel Branch.
Quiet giant. He, when he was a junior, I started pointing out that the paint was his paint. And I would say in practice, is your paint. Anyone comes into your paint, you own them, they don't own you, get them out. And by his junior year, very quietly, because there were a lot of players around him, he was just a quiet giant at the back of the red press. So you finally got past the guards and the pressure and the little small Curtis gym, and you think you're home free, and suddenly you had 6'8" with a huge wingspan looking to block your shot. That was Angel. Great player. Used to go to Bobby Hurley Sr. in the summers over in Jersey City. So there's a kid, nobody knew about that. He would quietly go over every single day and work out with St. Anthony's in Jersey City to get better. So when young players want to know what it takes sacrifice. And too often people forget that.
Nigel Wyatt.
Best practice player I ever had. As you know, I used to give out practice player of the day. And when Nigel was a senior, he should have won it every single day. And I refused to give it to him just because he was working hard and I wanted to get other players. And every single day he would kill himself in practice. He was such a hard worker. And I would give it to someone else at the end of practice, and he would just keep looking at me like, "Coach, what do I got to do? What do I got to do?"
I think he told me that before.
Yeah, and he totally, probably never said this to anyone, but he totally deserved it.
Every practice.
Probably for almost every practice, but I don't think I gave him one. Got to keep him hungry.
Shout out to Nigel. Steven Solo Perry.
Steven was just another. I would probably call him like the silent assassin, because he would kill teams and they wouldn't even know he was killing them. He would just get the rebound, get the putback, make the shot, defend the other team's better scorer who was bigger. And at the end of the game, like, he didn't get the headlines in the paper, he didn't get interviewed on TV, but without him, we wouldn't have won. And that team was so well balanced and unselfish with the ball. And he could not have cared less about any accolades, any praise, nothing. He just wanted to win. And I think that's what really made Curtis special. I think we developed an attitude of winning that I remember Coach Kasha saying to me one time early on, that the thing about Curtis kids is they just hate to lose. And he said that they have this fire in their eyes with 2 minutes to go in a close game that used to say, "We're not going to lose this." And I always remembered that. And I wish I could tell you what we did to promote that. But it's something that I think helped with the success that you spoke about earlier.
Hameen Atherton.
I mean, Atherton, his brother, Saki Bryant, no one watching this knows who they are. And yet, because they were on the bench. And yet, you do not win championships without those guys. Everyone thinks it's the Sandy Brock, it's the Red Trips, it's the Nigels. Those guys were a shining example, and there were so many that pushed the starters in practice, got into some games, didn't get into others, but were totally focused on the success of the team. And I mean totally focused. Like, I don't know if those kids exist anymore, because social media says you have to start, and if you don't start, mommy and daddy have to yell at the coach. If I'm not getting my points, then I'm not going to win the Jakes, or I'm not going to be an all-star. Like, that type of focus is way overboard, not just on Staten Island, but it's way overboard on Staten Island. And those three role models, like, those guys are champions, because you cannot have a championship chemistry of a team without that. You know, you've heard me talk oftentimes about you either have chemistry or you have cancer. And the cancer are the guys who are complaining in the locker room about not playing. They're making nasty remarks about the kids who are playing above them. There's tension. And those guys were not only a pleasure and really good players that had they been on other teams, they would have been clearly starting, but they just happened to be on with players who were of superior talent.
It's funny that you say that because, you know, coaching and even me coaching in summertime, I take a kid out, you know, they pouting, then, you know, the parents they think their kid going to the NBA. And I Googled what's the chances of a kid going to the NBA? It's like 0.1%. But like, I remember a practice, I want to believe my senior year, we ran 39 straight suicides. I don't know what Rocky did. It wasn't me.
Well, it was never you.
It never wasn't me. Shout out to Rocky. But I remember running 39 straight suicides in practice and looking over at Saki, and he's pushing me to run. But I don't realize that when I'm 17. I realize that now that I'm coaching, that there's no more Sakis, there's no more Hassans, there's no more Hamins that's in basketball. And that I can see. I can't speak for other programs, or other teams or other organizations that coach, but I just know, like you said, though, without a Saki, without a Hamim, without Hassan, that they positive energy, we don't win those championships. So I just wanted to ask that question because Hameen is like a unsung hero.
Well, right, but it's also interesting, Red, and it's important to note that the three guys that you mentioned, who I happen to be friends with on Facebook, are all highly successful men now. And I link it. And listen, I don't take credit in any way. And Curtis Basketball does not take credit. This is about their parents and their families as much as it is about our structure. But that's the ultimate championship. If we're winning championships or we're winning the Jakes, and you know, as you know, and listen, I'm the chairman of the Jakes committee, and I tell people all the time, you should try to be the Zabrowski winner, not the Jakes winner, because the Jakes winner, that's a very separate class of a few individuals who have a shot at winning the Jakes. Anybody can win the Zabrowski Award, anybody. And that's from hard work, dedication, unselfishness. So when you look at these guys, they took their basketball experience and not only led their championship spirit to the team, but now they've taken that same championship spirit 20, 30 years later, and they're highly successful men. That's what we're supposed to be celebrating in sports. That's why we have sports in high school. It's not to win games, it's to teach lessons outside of a classroom. They're out there. We just got to find them.
I'm not coaching, so I'm not looking for them. You can leave them. Shout out to Hameen, Hassan, and Saki, and Miss Diane, their mother. Jeff McMillan.
Jeff McMillan, you talk about a kid who shined when he first transferred in, and you know I don't like transfers. I'm not a great fan of transfers in. But when he first transferred in, he made the team on a Monday. He missed practice on Tuesday, missed practice on Wednesday, and I called a meeting to dismiss him from the team. And he was, as you know, a Division I player, and I was going to be a lot smarter if he was on the team, but I wasn't going to tolerate this attitude. And the great Tom Konchowski called me.
Rest in peace.
And super scout of the East Coast and really all of America, and gave me a little bit of advice and gave me a little background. And I met with Jeff and his group home supervisor with Coach Aponte. And I laid it out. I said, listen, you're here every day. You're in your classes. You're doing everything that our handbook, because remember we had the Curtis basketball handbook, everything that handbook says you better do every single day. Otherwise, this is it. And it was because his supervisor begged me. And I remember he walked out, and I turned to Coach Aponte. I go,
Practice.
what do you think? What are the chances he's going to last with me? And Coach Aponte, I'll never forget, said 10%. I said, okay, that's what I thought. It's not going to work, but, and from that moment on, I had zero issues with him. And that's an example where I just was laying it out. I wasn't trying to be a tough guy. I just said, I'm not going to go through what we had gone through with a player the year before. And Jeff Rose, and pleasure, hardest working player, a far better player than I think I coached him to be. I think looking back, I wished I had done a better job developing him. But Jeff was a great player, a great, great player, and a pleasure to coach from that Thursday on. First couple of days, not so much.
Jeremy Smalls.
Superior athlete, superior person. I mean, his house burned down on Staten Island. He got moved to the Bronx, didn't tell me, and would still make, after a Friday night game that ended at 10 o'clock at Curtis, he would go home to the Bronx on public transportation and still be back by 9 o'clock the next morning. Like, that more than anything defines him, you know. But certainly one of the best athletes. And again, another kid who came into the program after freshman year, but the program elevated him, and it was the people, the coaches, the other players, the discipline of the program, the culture of the program raised him up. And I think he's a great success, not only of Curtis basketball, he's a great success story of Curtis High School.
Omar Jenkins.
Lifer. I mean, Omar could probably right now, I think he's like 84 years old, but Omar could probably defeat 90% of the high school players on Staten Island one-on-one right now. He's just, he, his brother Michael, Ricky, the whole family, they're basketball lifers. They love the sport. I'm immensely proud of the man Omar has become and where he was in high school to I believe it might have been freshman year with me. He failed off, corrected himself, then went right through sophomore, junior, senior, won the Staten Island Championship as a senior under Coach Carroll, but has continued to use basketball to advance his own life, to advance his family members' lives. He's a true lifer. Like the boy needs to be buried with a basketball when the time comes, because he's going to just keep playing. But really just a role model for someone who came from a great family and continues to rise above whatever else society may throw at him that may try to knock him down. So much respect for Omar.
Who's the better Jenkins, Omar, Ricky, or Mike?
Well, that'd be Ricky. I mean, we all
all right.
we all know that.
All right.
Different types of players. It's funny because, you know, Omar won championship, Mike won championship, and very different types of players but also, to use my term from before, both of them were quiet assassins. They always were playing with players who got more of the spotlight than they did. Omar, I think, had Herb Lewis, played with Eric Sorensen, so there was always somebody else. But at the same point, both of them were the kind of the glue that made the championship possible. That toughness. I mean, certainly no one tougher for me than Mike J when it came to defense. He was a tough defender.
Last one. I get a lot of slack for this because I missed a lot of Curtis basketball with me going away. I didn't see Sandy. But my all-time favorite, Timmy Holland.
The thing about Timmy that, I compare him. There are two players in this category. One was Timmy and one was Kenny White, who I coached at Farrell, a great player. Went on to the University of Vermont, actually is on the basketball staff at Georgetown now. And both of them were tremendous shooters. But what was different about them, both of them, only two players that I could say this, is that when they made a pass, before they made the pass, they knew who the next pass should go to. And that understanding of the game is very, very rare. And both of them, different times, like Coach Kenny in the 80s, obviously Timmy in the 90s, they would come to me frustrated, like, did you see I made the pass? How could they not throw it to blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, they don't see that. Like, you see it, they don't see it. So both of them, listen, Timmy had crazy range. He was probably one of the few players that I would just keep on an off night. He had an off night, famous night at Susan Wagner. He couldn't hit the side of a barn. And I just kept saying at timeout, just shoot the ball, just shoot the ball. And I believed in my heart he was going to, at any moment, change it. And he just didn't. It's just one of those nights. But Timmy, just a remarkable shooter, remarkably intense player. Coach Aponte spent many a day talking to him when he got a little psychotic. But fun to coach. Made me look smart, which wasn't easy, that's for sure.
Last question. The last question is...
There's like 20 last questions, but
this is the last question.
I get ready for my fade.
Wilkinson, the last name Wilkinson.
I mean, great family. I think that they're almost like the predecessor to the Martin family at Curtis, even though I had Phil, the oldest Martin, for his sophomore year right before I left. The Wilkinson, starting with Sean Black, and then you go through, they were very much part of the foundation of what we did with Curtis basketball, going back to Sean Black, who went to Florida A&M after playing for Coach Carroll. I had him on the JV. They were the role models for how you act, because they have impeccable manners. They did the right thing in the classroom. So they set the bar for how to act, how to study, how to do the right things, how to talk to people. And it carried through. Like, they were all just great. Now they're great men, but back then they were great
kids,
young men. And, I remember, I know this is hard to believe, but we had a rough Tuesday night game. It was a Tuesday night. I remember that. And we had practice the following morning at 6 a.m. before school because Coach Gannon wasn't happy. And Hassan had to travel from the other side of the island. And I can remember at 5:30 the next morning, walking up to the main door at Curtis to open, and Haas beat me there. so he had gone home and then come back, and he didn't get a ride. He took the train from the other end, and I always remember that because I think that defined Haas, and it defined all of them. Like, well, if that's what we got to do, that's what we have to do. And so Haas playing and Timmy playing and Peter Timmons and all the guys you mentioned, they set the bars for you guys. And then when you guys came, you set the bars for the next group behind you. And I think ultimately that was the success wasn't because of Gannon or even a Nigel or a Timmy Highland or a Sandy, a Jake's winner. It was the collection of players that ultimately insisted on excellence from everyone, whether you were a starter or you were Saki and Hameen. And as a result, that culture became difficult to beat. So while it's easy for people to say, "Oh, you had the talent," all you do is roll the balls out. We had really good practices with really good players, and we had Saki, and we had Hameen, and we had Ray Palmer, and we had guys who just wanted to be part of something special, and by having that, that's what made it special.
Coach Gannon, it was a pleasure sitting down, talking with you. I could go on for hours if you want me to, but
Nobody wants you to, right?
shout out to the Wilkinson family. Shout out to ADG Barbershop. This is episode 2. Special shout out to Miss Gannon, because this interview would not happen without Miss Gannon.
That's very true.
So thank you, Miss Gannon. Very, very much appreciate you getting the best coach in Staten Island history to come down and chop it up with Coach Red at the barbershop.
Nobody agrees with that assessment, but I'll take the extra large and the sweatshirt.
Yes, I have your Miss Gannon hoodie.